Welcome to The Built World Around You, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations shaping residential and commercial construction, as well as all the industries connected to it. Each week, we're going to sit down with thought leaders, rising stars, and real problem solvers tackling today's toughest challenges. From job site breakthroughs to boardroom strategies, we're here to share the lessons, the struggles, and the success stories that are building tomorrow's world right now. So grab your hard hat, sharpen your pencil, let's go to work. Welcome to episode 3. Episode 3, I'm so excited. We're going to have Lida Citroen on the show today. And I got to tell you, folks, man, if you've been sleeping under a rock and you haven't seen the phenomenal content that's been put out by a leading LinkedIn instructor, by a brand instructor, award-winning author, you're missing it. You're missing out. And so I'm so excited to introduce you to the one and only Lida. Lida, how are you doing today?
Any day I get to see you is a treat. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to be back on a virtual stage with you, and definitely want to get into all of the juicy nuggets that I know we're going to get into today. But before we get started, I'm a huge fan, but for those of us who have listened to you a little bit but don't really know, can you do a self-introduction for me?
Sure. So I have a background in branding, specifically recently personal branding for about 20 years. And as an author, an executive coach, and a keynote speaker, I have the amazing opportunity to bring the power of influence and confidence and self positioning to audiences in over 38 countries. And we'll share some of that goodness today.
That's fantastic.
Thanks.
38 countries.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. So let me ask you this,
Mhm.
right? And it's something that I must know. When you think of the built world around you, what's one project, community, network, company, event, or even relationship that's personally impacted or inspired you the most?
And you're gonna hate this answer, you're gonna love this answer because I don't think it's just one. I mean, in thinking
Right
about
on.
that question, it's, the small villages that I had a chance to visit in Greece. It's the beaches in Spain. It's the Eiffel Tower. It's
Right.
it's all these legacy experiences that tie to culture. And I think when cultures have communicated their values and their passion in a built structure or experience,
Mm.
I think for visitors, that is memorable. So, I should say something in my own backyard, maybe Bronco Stadium?
Well, how does one get started in your line of work, right? And I know reading your books, you put a lot of your lived experience into your writing, but
Mhm.
where do you think, if you were to synthesize it all the way down, and someone that wanted to kind of get started on step one, kind of follow in your footsteps, where do you get started?
In terms of working in personal branding or speaking, writing,
I
which
would I would say becoming the resource, because you're a mentor and resource to me personally. And so I go to you when I need inspiration. I go to you for guidance, right? Just by watching you move and watching your brand and your, I'm going to call it this. You didn't call it this. I'm going to call it this. Your empire at Lida 360 that you were building, right?
Huh.
Uh, it's inspirational, right? So,
Mhm.
but how does one go from the beginning? Like, what's the first step? If you had to say, hey, you know what, college student that you're just now graduating and you want to start on this self ownership, self branding progress. You want to start creating multiple in industry brand types. right?
Mhm.
That relate to multiple folks, not just one niche environment. This is how you could start, or this is what you would do to get started.
And here's the answer. I think it starts with knowing who you are. And that answer is very hard for young people, right? Because all they are is consumed with getting to the next. And I think most of us did that, right?
Mm,
I know I spent 20 years in the corporate world just focused on what comes next, right? Meet the goals, hit the quotas, do all the things that check the boxes so that the next thing would come, whether it was a promotion or another opportunity. But I never stopped to ask myself why. Why
mm,
me? Why is that what I want? Why is that meaningful? I never asked myself those questions. So I kind of was in that hamster wheel, which I think young people
absolutely.
naturally are, but I even run into that with more seasoned or experienced executives that we don't stop to figure out who we are and why we're here. You know that I share often the Mark Twain quote, right? There's two
Right.
important days of your life: the day you're born and the day you realize why. And some
Mm.
of us are fortunate that we get to ask ourselves that question and the hourglass hasn't run out. So we have time to do something about it. But I couldn't have built anything I built that I have built if I hadn't asked myself that question and really leaned into it. May not be the answer that I want, but it's the right answer. And I'm going to do something with it to make sure that this time I have on this planet is meaningful and important and leaves a legacy. And I talked about those built-in environment features, they're legacies. They stand the test of time. They're passed through generations. Their stories are wrapped around them. And that's ideally what we can have for our own life. So you have to know what your vision is. What's your purpose? Why?
Asking yourself those introspective questions,
Mhm.
right? You might be scared of what you find,
Well,
and
often you will be.
when you're taking stock, right? So let's if we're all in alignment, I believe you and I share the same thought process that
Mhm.
we're all works in progress,
Mhm.
and that there's a continuous improvement to betterment. But
Mhm.
when someone takes stock, right, and they start to take ownership, because taking stock is okay, but the self accountability piece,
Mhm.
you can kind of list all the things, but without the then what,
Mhm.
right, that we're talking about, it lacks substance because you're just kind of going through the motions of I am a person who solves problems. My superpower is that I am a connector that solves problems,
Mhm.
right? Oh, and then I would say for me, that's my self-awareness, right? And
Mhm.
so trying to figure out what do I do in this world with that superpower, with that skill set, and then figure out what's the next step. How do I get smarter in that sector? How do I monetize that? How do I solve problems for others with this? And I think that's important on that. What's the next step once you do that introspective? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree, and I think, the question isn't answered with "I'm a connector," and that's I don't know that I would argue that's the full answer,
Mm,
because why are you a connector? Why did you get tapped to be a connector and somebody else not? What is it about you? And then you start unpacking the who, the where, the why, and the what and the how, right? Who are you supposed to connect? Who are you gonna solve problems for? I love when people respond with everyone and every problem. It's like, well, you let me know how that works out for you, because I don't have that many hours in the day. But
that's right.
really, it's there's technique, and I don't know who came up with it. Somebody did, not me. It's like five whys, right? You keep asking yourself the five whys. So why are you here? I'm a connector. Why? Because I thrive when I can bring two ideas or two people together. Why? Because I get meaning from seeing people
Perfect.
find joy. Why?
Right.
And most people can't get to five or six because it gets really hard. The first couple ones are easy, but the five or six is where it gets really meaty. And it's kind of giving ourselves permission to go there. And you're right, we may not like what we find because it may challenge everything we believe to be true. I thought the definition of success was, a healthy paycheck, a lot of responsibility, a C after my name, right? CMO, CEO, all of that stuff. Those were the things I had been taught. And so when I started
Mhm.
asking myself those questions, those things didn't become important. Well, is my sense of identity attached to those things? And what does that mean? Am I now flying without a net? And in my experience, having done this for a very long time, what you find is that the net was actually underneath that. You just had to get rid of the sort of the superficial thing first. And what's
Love it.
holding you grounded is so much richer and more beautiful, but we have to go there.
And oh man, that we could spend an hour or so talking about, going there, right? And what do
Mhm.
you find when you get at your core? If you've never been there, it's a scary place. I
Very.
do challenge our listeners to
Mhm.
see how many whys you can get through on your journey while you're thinking about in that introspective. Would love to see in the comments what are some of the limits that we put on ourselves if we're not willing to ask ourselves the difficult questions
Yeah.
and come up with the difficult answers. I love that. So, small pivot then,
Okay.
I know that you have a lot of things going on. Um, what are you working on right now that you're most excited about?
Well, a couple things. You know that I released a book in 2024 called The New Rules of Influence. And that book is my why. And to the point of what we were just talking about, I had to go there in the book and I shared some very personal things. Um, some that my analytical brain said not very sound to reveal this, but my heart said, but if you're telling people they have to share vulnerability, then you better go there.
Right?
And I've been doing a lot of work and speaking and writing and coaching around the principles because the book really is about helping maybe underrepresented voices or marginalized voices find a way to be heard in this world that are a little non-conventional. And the concepts are not necessarily, brain surgery, but put together the way that I put them together tell a very different story. I break down the model of executive presence, which I think is outdated and doesn't work, especially not for people who look like me, right? Because the
Right.
poster child is very different. So I break down executive presence. I argue that you can have a voice without needing to be the loudest person in the room. But really, what we all want is influence. We want to be heard. We want people to take us seriously and to listen to us when we have something to say. And from that, as you know, because you were one of my guests, I launched a podcast, the Lida Citroen podcast, and you helped me unpack one of the concepts from the book, which is the idea that leaders need to be agile. And I have to say, it was probably one of my favorite podcast episodes because,
Oh,
man,
shucks. You're saying you have to say that.
no, you were bringing it. I was like, I couldn't write fast enough, and I get that feedback from listeners too. So I'm really excited to see that you've got one going too. But really, just helping people. I'm speaking at conferences of audiences and groups I don't belong to, but that's
Mm,
also kinda how I got to work with the military. I work with the military, I don't belong to that community, but that's the whole point of influence, is you don't have to look like everyone else in the room to be
that's right.
heard and respected if you bring the right stuff with you and you share your message in the right way. We all get a chance.
I love that. I would say one of the things that watching you and for those of you who don't know, that military service members and the community that supports them is how Lita and I met. So
Mhm.
small tangent and story. So Vets Indexes is a phenomenal group that essentially provides information to companies to make them more military service member friendly
Mhm.
in the long run and gives them a how to guide on these are the things that are essential. for that business to become essentially accredited with being a veteran-friendly environment and company. And they do a great job. One of the panels supporting how do you properly communicate to retain and obtain talent, essentially, Lida and I spoke on. How are you supposed to relate to? How do you synthesize what a military service member's experience or resume? How does that equate to the civilian population? We unpacked a lot of things, and you were the best moderator in that panel, and I appreciate you. But that's how we met, guys. So years ago, hanging out in Manhattan, and talking to companies of all shapes and sizes and
Mhm.
advising them how to better relate and create a talent pool from the military service community. And you do a phenomenal job in supporting uh, that demographic of again, it's an underrepresented, under a supported fraction of a talent pool that's out there. And I appreciate you and applaud you for your work in the community.
Well, I had the easy job, Bobby. You and others who put on the uniform have the harder job. But I just found a way to say thank you for your service in a more meaningful way. And yeah, it's been actually in November of 2025, it'll be 16 years. I've been working with the military. 3 of my books are about military transition and reintegration. And I would say many of my friends have come out of that experience as well. My TED talk was about the idea of how I work as a civilian with the
Right.
military. So, yeah.
It's one of those things that not a lot of folks understand that when you've been drilled in a specific skill set, right?
Mhm.
Your service, no matter which branch you're in, what your occupational specialty is, when you work in that realm, right? And then all of a sudden it's time to transition out. Right? The
Mhm.
grip of fear of unknown that
Mhm.
hits most service members and the kitchen table talk that they then have to have with their families and kind of navigate this new unknown mission that's ahead of them. It takes a hefty toll. And the ability to go beyond those transition classes that, the Department of Defense makes everyone take before they get out.
Mhm.
Um, and to do something that's tangible and teach them how to leverage what they already know and go that much further beyond those I would say remedial task type of check boxes that the transition classes make you do, and actually have gained more soft skills and more insight to the civilian population. I love your work in that sector.
Well, and thank you for that. And if you think about it, the military is a culture. It is a very unique culture with its own language, sets of rules, customs, pageantry, everything. But it's not unlike if you think about cultures, how it is to go from one culture, which has its own rules and
Right.
language and pageantry, into another. The difference is that you go into the military as a civilian, you come out as a civilian, but you've spent time in this other culture. Um, so when you were remarking at the fact that I said I've worked in over 38 countries, those are different cultures. And that's really what it is understanding how do we promote ourselves? How do we tell our story? How do we self promote in a different culture? So when I'm working with somebody coming out of the military, it isn't about, erasing what they did, because of course we don't want to do that, but it's how do you translate what you did into a new language that will be better received in the way you intend in this new culture. If I'm going to, work in India, which I do a lot of work in India and Israel and Canada, and all these
Mm,
very different cultures, I have to adapt and translate my stories, my examples, my methodology to make sure it's culturally that it fits so that it
right.
is received the way I intend it. Now, the military has all sorts of other layers, and I certainly don't mean to minimize that. But at a basic level, it's a cultural difference. And civilian employers are recognizing that all we have to do is understand the differences. It's not a right or wrong. It's not one is good and one is bad. it's just understanding the differences on both sides and then finding the way to meet in the middle so that we both understand what we're trying to say.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. So if you think of all of this well-rounded experience, right, that you have from your lived experience, your journey, and the things that you're endeavoring to do, uh, if you had to say, fast forward 10 years,
Ah.
how do you hope the world, the legacy, how do you hope it will look? What do you feel it will look
That the world will look how the world will look?
like? Well, the world will view, I guess, the legacy, right? What you're building today, right? What
Oh.
will that look like in 10 years? What will the world see in 10 years? Out of Lida 360,
Mm,
out of all the things that you're currently doing right now. Fast forward 10 years.
sure. Well, I've always said my legacy, I hope, is that I gave more than I took. And I take a lot, trust me. But that I always gave more. I gave more to my friends, I gave more to my community, I gave more to my readers and my listeners and my audiences and my clients. Um, and I would like to think because I think there's a trend starting in this country, in the world right now, where we're listening to different conversations. We're starting to open our hearts and our ears to things that might sound or look a little different. I would hope that continues because I think difference has been seen as scary, and difference is where richness lives. It's where conversations live. It's where ideas come from. It's where influence builds. And I would love to think if I played any role in empowering people to just be a little bit more okay listening to something they may not agree with or listening to something that might cause them to be curious instead of just shutting down and focusing on confirmation bias or hanging out in echo chambers and the stuff that's is so much more comfortable and so much
Right,
safer. It's our warm spot. But going to those places that feel a little scary, but saying, but what if I learn something? What if I get a new idea? Or what if I feel more confident in my own idea, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to hear the hard stuff or the different stuff and not shy away from it. I would love for that to be an outgrowth of the work that I'm doing because that's really what self-promotion is. It's not about being loudest. It's not about neon lights around your name. It's not about, being a Kardashian. That's not what we're
right.
talking about. But it is about celebrating who we are, and who we are is different. We're all different. Our DNA at the most fundamental level is different. And that's what makes us beautiful. And celebrating that and embracing that, I just think is my hope for the future.
I love that. And I think embracing all of our differences and realizing that we are one people,
Yeah.
right? One human race. I think the world would be a better place in 10 years if that's where we arrive. And I thank you for your work on bringing it front and center. And thank you for mentioning it here on the show today.
Of course.
That it's important to understand that we are different, and that's okay.
Absolutely, that we should. I think, my parents came to this country as European immigrants, and when I remember they would tell me stories of all you wanted to do was fit in, right? My mother had to this day has a very heavy accent. My father had a very heavy accent, and they tried to get rid of all of that because you wanted to sound like everyone else. You wanted your house to look like everyone else's. And I don't know that that really was the goal. I think the goal was we didn't know, or the issue was we didn't know how to deal with our difference. And if something was different, we saw that as a threat or as something that caused questions that we didn't know how to answer. And I think we've come far from that. So, yeah, I just love the idea that we can all coexist and celebrate our differences. It doesn't mean one is better or worse. It just means that, that's how we were designed and that's what was intended.
Yes, indeed. I love it. Well, I can't let you skate out of here. We could talk a long time, but I can't let you skate without asking, if you could leave one blueprint, one
Mhm.
idea, principle, and you've said a couple already
Mhm.
today, but a lesson for the next generation of professionals. and problem solvers out there, what would that lesson or gem be?
Courage. I think it would be a message of courage. The world is a scary place, and there's beauty and there's love and warmth and elegance and intellectual stimulation all over the place, but it is a scary place. And I think, I learned a lot about courage from our military veterans. Things I didn't even know were possible, ways to find courage. And courage doesn't mean you're not afraid, but it means working through fear. And I think we need a little more courage. And I think leaders today need to, find that spot inside that they can draw upon and say the hard stuff, have the direct conversations, um, know that they could get canceled, they could get, ousted, bad things could happen, but those bad
Mm,
things could also lead to great things. And courage is a good thing. I think we could have more courage.
I love it. I love it so
Thanks.
much. Well, Lida, I appreciate you. I know that we could talk for hours, and I wanna thank you for coming on the show. If folks wanted to experience more of your wisdom, experience more of your insights, what's the best way for them to connect with you or get more information from your work?
Well, all roads lead to my website, which is lida360.com, and that's LIDA 360.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you know, and I'd love for people to check out either my YouTube or my new podcast, the Lida Citroen podcast, and watch the episode or listen to the episode that Bobby and I did, because man, he was dropping those nuggets left and right, and they were brilliant. So,
Well, I thank you so much, Lida. You have a great day.
absolutely. Thank you.
If you'd like to hear more from Lida, please absolutely jump on all the socials. She's very heavy on all the socials. And go visit her website, get her books, get more insights from her. You will not be sorry at all. Until next time, folks. Thank you for listening to The Built World Around You. If today's conversation gave you new insights or sparked fresh ideas, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps more builders, leaders, and innovators join the conversation. Until next time, keep building smarter, leading stronger, and shaping the world around you.